Stephen Moore, a senior fellow at the Heritage Foundation and an economist, wrote an opinion piece this week in the Washington Times about how nobody seems to be alarmed at the steady decline in test scores by our American students. He lives in Montgomery County and said he chose to move his children out of public and into private schools. Montgomery County is always successful at convincing voters to accept higher taxes so the cost of education can increase, yet we don't even have a mediocrity to show for it. Maricé, MCPS used to be the best in the nation. What will it take to try something different?
Excellent question. That is the budgetary question of every budget cycle. First, I would say that this is not an issue of private versus public. This is, our schools are suffering in terms of teacher to student ratios. And if this is an opinion piece. This is not a research piece. So just, given that, but happy to still respond to it. The key word here being our American students. I'm not sure what he meant by saying our American students. Montgomery County is one of the #1 jurisdictions in the country to receive the most diverse students coming from, families of all backgrounds. I think this is a national issue where our classroom teachers are being asked to wear way too many hats, from doing not only the educating but the social services piece, psychological and mental health pieces. We have a diverse spectrum of needs in our schools. So it's not really just a private versus public. Absolutely, if your local district school is not getting the resources that it needs, and you can afford to send your kids to private school, then that's a no-brainer. This is an issue about post-pandemic and making sure that we are respecting the profession of our educators, because they deserve better.
Stacey, do you have a silver bullet answer?
Yes, vote Republican.
And
listen,
why would that make a difference?
Well, I can make that pitch at the end. I just want to touch on something that Maricé just talked about, and that was the pandemic. Did you all know that right now, the most outstanding school system in this country is the Department of Defense? And this was reported by the New York Times on October 10th. Stephen Moore's piece came out on October 16th. And what the reporter in the New York Times indicated was that in the classrooms, there's a high level of discipline. Oh, that's a big surprise, right? And that they follow a core curriculum, and the teachers are paid well enough. So that they don't have to pay for their own supplies. And this is something that Moore was talking about that is essential, he thinks, to a good education in this country. So by comparison to the other 50 states, the Department of Defense students had much higher math scores in proficiency in 4th and in 8th grade. Whereas you look at the state of Maryland, and it's dismal here, especially up in Baltimore. So one of the things that they pointed out in the New York Times article was that 85% in December 2020, 85% of the DoD schools were open during COVID, whereas less than 10% of Maryland schools were open. So we saw the damage that was done from not having classroom participation. So I think that what this boils down to, Maricé, you and I can both agree that there may be a lot of social issues that are going on, but one of the core things is discipline. So having a disciplined classroom culture where the lunatics are no longer in charge of the asylum and the teachers have more control and discipline over the students. I think that this is something that we can all agree on that needs
to. I would not use that metaphor for schools. I don't believe that schools are asylums. And then going back to your point of voting Republican, if you look at the Republican jurisdictions across the country, that is where our teachers are actually losing their wages, salaries, and benefits. So I would completely disagree. And in your example of the Department of Defense, which is not comparable to a K-12 statewide program. So you're not comparing apples to apples. But in your own statement, you mentioned that the teachers need the resources, that they can't be losing sleep over, are all my kids going to have a snack at 10 a.m. And the other thing, if you think about who are actually educating our students, our kids, it's millennials, people that look like me, people that have crippling student debt. So if you have an individual who has gone through undergrad, grad school, a master's in education, has over maybe $200,000 worth of student debt, and you're telling them that at an entry level they're going to be making 45,000. It just doesn't make sense. So if you want, you get what you pay for. If you don't respect the education profession, then you're never really going to get the results that we need for a competitive workforce that's going to lead the state of Maryland.
I don't think this has anything to do with not respecting the teachers. I think this has a lot to do with the teachers' unions and how much control that they've got over these systems. And that's been a downfall, I think. So when you look at the core issue again, and take discipline into consideration, then if you reinstitute higher levels of discipline in that classroom culture, you're going to get better results overall, and it'll make it easier for the teachers to do their job. And by the way, God love you for getting your teaching certificate. You'd make an excellent teacher. Why aren't you out there doing that? You went to law school. Is that what you did?
I'm not sure what you're. I'm not a teacher.
Oh, I'm sorry.
You misunderstood. What I was gonna also say, in terms of the unions, it's actually the Republican Party and every administration, starting from Nixon, that has created disincentive for workers to unionize, to actually stand up for their rights and have the benefits and the salaries that they deserve. So I understand that there is definitely a control issue from the teachers unions, and I agree with you. There has to be a more balanced policymaking in terms of not just what the educator needs, but also the needs of our students. And I think that the Montgomery County model is lacking in that we're not addressing all the needs of the diverse student body that we have.
Yeah,
So
and I think we have to wrap it up here and move on to parting shots next. So stay tuned.